Welcome, welcome to Freaked Out with your psychic medium host, Liz. That's me. I know you guys were expecting the Luigi episode to be dropped, but I'm not quite done with it. And there's a few things that I am trying to figure out, and it seems impossible, but we'll get there one day. So I'll announce it when it's getting dropped. I also wanted to apologize. This week, I've actually been so sick. I got sick and I just haven't stopped being sick. So that is why this episode took a little longer to drop. I've had this ready to go for a few days now, but I just didn't have the strength to finish it, which is very frustrating for an Aries like myself. I also want to mention I appreciate everyone in my comment section letting me know that they do, in fact, like the way I do things here, which is a relief because I guess it's the new people coming in that don't know how I work with things. So I'm just going to do a little introduction every video so that everyone knows who I am and what I do. So for those of you who are new here, I am a psychic medium. I create a lot of content here on TikTok, even on our podcast, but now we're just solely focusing on YouTube. TikTok, we still do some things, but not as heavy as we do it here. What I normally do is I start off by sharing details about the case and no, that part's not the prediction or the visions or the channeling session. And then as I carry on, yes, I will say, this spirit tells me this, or this is the prediction I feel here, just to clarify to everyone what's a prediction and what's a fact. And again, these are predictions, visions, channeling sessions. I'm not going to get everything right. That's just impossible. But I do this for closure. I do this to see if my videos, what I say, what I do, gets spread around the world and brings people home. And also sometimes we just enjoy having some fun. Like today's episode, I have covered Brittany Murphy multiple times, and we've covered her on the podcast a couple of times. So if you were someone who was a fan on the podcast, you will love this episode. We are briefly going to go over what happened to Brittany Murphy, including what I had seen, what she had shown me, in addition to doing some girl talk, because she shared some information that I never thought she would. So today's episode is called Brittany Murphy Girl Talk. It's interesting because a lot of people, which myself included in that, enjoy communicating with spirits because we want to find out what happened. But sometimes they just want to have fun and talk about regular things. And she's a girl's girl, and I love that kind of energy. So for me, I'm going to entertain the hell out of it. She is that BFF energy, and she really never got to be a BFF with somebody like wholeheartedly because her mom and then her husband were like BFFs and like toggling between each other, and it's a hot mess, and we'll get into it. All right, what is coming next? Our next episode will be dropped a little later this week. It will be the Matthew Perry episode, and that will be exclusive. So if you are not part of the members only part of our channel, you would have to become a member. You can take a watch at other YouTube videos on how to go about being a member, but I will also put a link in this particular description of this video. But anyways, let's get into Brittany Murphy. So Brittany Murphy was actually an extremely talented actress. And her big role, her big first role, from my opinion, was Clueless, the movie Clueless. Who doesn't love that movie? I know it was like a huge hit for me growing up. I wasn't even in high school yet, or just about to hit high school. And that movie became my Bible for whatever reason. It was just so fun, and get to see how the LA side of people work and how rich and famous they are. It was really good. It was a good adaptation of it, and I really enjoyed that movie. She was also in the movie 8 Mile, Just Married, and unfortunately, she tragically died December 20th, 2009. And she was only 32 years old. I couldn't even imagine. Now, her death was sudden and surrounded by speculation, but we're going to break it down for you here because there's a lot to say on this matter. So there was a claim that her health was declining in the weeks leading up to her death. Now, Brittany was apparently struggling with like flu-like symptoms. She had laryngitis. She was also just physically weak. And she had not seen a doctor for her symptoms. I wonder why. She was technically being treated with over-the-counter drugs and prescription medication to take home, but no doctor saw her. I find it very convenient that no doctor saw her. And I think that if my wife or husband or child, for that matter, was not well and they had like flu-like symptoms for a while, I'd be like pushing my kid out the door. You know what I'm saying? When I had initially reached out to Brittany, it took a lot of convincing to get her to communicate with me. It took me about 6 months, I'd say, and her passing happened a while ago. It's not that she didn't trust me, but her husband, who also had passed away, didn't trust me. But I believe it's because he knew what I had been through in my life and how much of an advocate I am for abused women. And he was afraid that I would, I don't know, share some information, suggest for her to leave him, whatever the case may be. She had rose-colored glasses on when it came to him, even in death. And I'll tell ya, I've run into this a couple of times with like my regular everyday customers that would come to me to get readings, but never have I dealt with it with a celebrity before. And if I'm going to be honest, I was pretty worried because her vision of who he was and what I see he was, it was just two very conflicting details, and I didn't think I'd ever get through to her. And then I also had done an episode with him, which I only agreed to because I wanted like Brittany to see all the holes in his story. So ultimately, I had my own agenda as to why I allowed for him to be in my circle to do this very ridiculous episode, which he did. But I'm very glad that he did because it helped Brittany find her way. Now, from what Brittany showed me now, she was actually spiritually captured. And I know you're thinking, what is that? I know, I didn't even know what it was. But basically, when we die, we go through that transitional period. Like I've told you, some stay in the transitional period, some cross over. And most of the time, if you haven't had like a murder or an unsolved case or something, if you died of natural causes or an accident, most of the time people cross over very quickly. But if there is some things leading to your death, people tend to stay in the transitional period. Now, Simon wanted Brittany to stay in this transitional period with him because when you get to the crossing over part, they show you details of your life, maybe reminding you things. He was hella afraid that when she crossed over, she would not want to be with him anymore because he was gaslighting the shit out of her here and up there as well. Now, I do want to mention as well that when I started talking to Brittany a couple of years ago, she had not crossed over. So everybody was in the transitional period at that time. And when he had died, just a few short months after she had died, from what she shows me, he didn't really give her the opportunity to find closure because he, again, was just love bombing her with bullshit. And so much so that she was convinced that he wasn't even part of her death, which in reality, he absolutely was. Alrighty. Now, when I had initially done my channeling session with Brittany, I had thought rat poisoning. I knew for a fact that there was poisoning because she was just falling apart little by little each and every single day, and things were not getting better and her immune system was getting lower. But as I communicate with her today, she actually was able to give me a little bit more detail on what exactly was used to kill her. So there are a lot of poisonous plants out there. There's something called wolfsbane, and there's something in wolfsbane like called aconitine that can quickly degrade the body, making it challenging to find it in postpartum, making it challenging to find it in post-mortem examinations, potentially complicating an investigation of someone's death. And I see that her husband had been slowly poisoning her little by little. He would start off very small, and then as time progressed, he would increase the dosage. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why in the hell would he try to poison her? He wasn't, in fact, trying to kill her. He was just preventing her from working. He wanted her to stay at home, become a stay at home mom, and just live off the money that she had already made. He felt like he could get a business and start some sort of business venture. He did not want her playing any sort of acting roles with men alongside of her. He was very afraid that she would be convinced to leave him. So, in his mind, she was in the worst position she could possibly be in, and he didn't want her to have that life anymore. He pushed that narrative so heavily on her, but from what she showed me, that was one thing that she fought for harder than anything else. She was willing to give up her space, her alone time, her everything, but this was the one thing that she had not wanted to give up. Yes, she wanted to be a mom. She wanted to have children, but she certainly felt like she could do both at the same time with taking breaks in between. And that is what she wanted, and that did not collide with what he wanted. He had explained to her when we were communicating that he had done this because of that. Now, I had to explain to Brittany during that time that that was not love. He tried to like romanticize it to her, and I'm telling her, like, dude, he killed you. He killed you. Hello? Now let's carry on and talk about her career. Now, Brittany's career had slowed down, again, for multiple reasons. One being her husband, one being with mom agreeing with the husband, and then two, and then three, she did technically want a little bit of a break. So she wasn't angry about the slowdown, but she didn't want it to stop completely. Now, she was actually reported fired from a movie called The Caller while filming in Puerto Rico in the same year that she was murdered in 2009. And there were rumors floating around saying that there was some erratic behavior on set. And although Brittany and her representatives, claimed that this was not true, but it was. This is something I just found out about more recently. Everyone is just trying to protect Brittany, technically not even Brittany, but like all the stuff going on behind closed doors, mom and husband, both trying to prevent her from, having her own life. And she shows me that she had enough. And I believe that her husband was either there or on the phone. Something happened there, which triggered her extremely hard. And that is when she had a nervous breakdown, mental breakdown. And she told some people off. She acted a certain way. It was not good. And these rumors are not just rumors, they are very true. And from what I can see, they all feel incredibly guilty now that they didn't look into the matter a little bit more and just assumed it was, her losing her touch or whatever the case may be, or doing drugs. Many different reasons, but they do all feel bad that they didn't focus more so on helping her, because maybe if they had, maybe she wouldn't have died when she did. He was also trying to get her to quit this particular movie, and I don't know why. There might have been a guy who was going to be in the movie that really triggered him, but one way or another, she was fighting hard. And when it happened, she's like, well, there you go. You got your wish. Brittany lived with her husband and her mom in her mansion, which was in Hollywood Hills, and it was previously owned by Britney Spears. And we're going to talk about that a little later on, because holy shit. Now, Simon was, older than Brittany. In my opinion, the perfect partner for her mother. Her mother is very old-fashioned, we'll call her. She believes that the man should be treated as the head of the household. But ironically enough, in her own experience with Brittany's dad, that doesn't seem to be the way for her. But projecting all of this onto her daughter. Interesting. She also spent a lot of time defending Simon instead of defending her own daughter. Often, it happened so often that Brittany was like, well, I guess I'm the wrong one here. But in reality, Brittany should have been able to do what she wanted. She was a full-blown 30-something-year-old adult. I see that Brittany never went against her mom, period. Brittany's mom was one of those stage moms, the inappropriate stage moms. Very overbearing, very controlling, bossing people around. From what Brittany shows me, she loved her mom and, of course, said nothing against her mom, but it did embarrass her a lot. And at times, she would try to calm her mom down in those moments because her mom would act up. And a lot of the other cast members noticed it as well. And Brittany shows me too, there were moments that she could hang out with the cast, but there was a lot of moments where her mom didn't let her hang out with certain people, including anyone of ethnicity. Alicia Silverstone was probably the only one that mom was totally okay with her hanging out with. There were multiple moments throughout her marriage with Simon that she approached her mother about leaving him. And sometimes the mom would entertain it, but more often than not, she would say things like, he loves you. He would never hurt you. He's not like anyone else. He's not here for the money. People would be here for the money. And every single time she got shot down, she just said, all right, never mind. When you're a woman in a situation like that, and me being somebody in that situation, other people's opinions are truly important. And I remember many people coming to me and saying, you got to get out of this situation. And then in the same sentence, that same person would be like, it's fine. They're fine. They didn't do anything wrong. And it was very confusing. So then you're like, oh, okay, maybe it's just me then. And of course, it's her own mother. The only other person that she really, really connected deep with was her mom. And her mom and her went far back, so she would take her mom's word. You're supposed to love your mother. All right, let's move on to the next part. Obviously, Simon died as well. How did Simon die? Well, he poisoned himself as well. He realized after Brittany had died and he had been the one to murder her that he wanted to be with her. He wanted to go to her. So I see that he did exactly what he did to Brittany, but I see that he gave himself bigger doses, which led to his death a lot quicker. Now, I know I've been coming hard on Brittany's mom, but I do feel bad for her because she did lose her daughter, but I also believe she doesn't realize the accountability. Even after Brittany died, she's still stuck by Simon's side, and you would think in a moment like that, you would start to question things. She did question mold-related things, but she never even once questioned Simon. Has that changed since? Yeah, I do believe privately, she won't say it out loud, but there's some moments where she feels like, okay, maybe this was associated with him. Now, Brittany did tell me that she contemplated taking her life on multiple occasions. She felt like she was mentally unwell, which I understand. If somebody was constantly telling me all of my thoughts and emotions about somebody who's abusing me was not right, I would also feel mentally unwell as well. And they treated her like she was crazy, and they ganged up on her together, and then they would both gaslight her at the same time. I'll tell you, he is one slimy son of a bitch. He would have unnecessarily inappropriate conversations with his mother-in-law, even talking about their sex life, telling her to make Brittany have sex with him, just some weird shit. I know if my daughter came to me and was telling me that this person was being terrible to them, I wouldn't even question it even a minute. If their partner came to me, regardless of how buddy, chummy I was, they told me some weird shit like, hey, you need to tell your daughter to have sex with me. I'd be like, ew, no, get fucked, out of my house, whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's not what a mother should do. And I don't want to make this as an excuse for her either, but I do see that her mom relied heavily on medication. She was still very checked out from her past, and instead of dealing with the issues, she just took medication to make it go away. So she wasn't in her own mind. And in her mind, she was thinking, well, I lost out in my life. I don't want my daughter to lose out as well. So was she coming from a bad place? No. Was she doing anything right? No. Now let's talk about her death a little bit more. Brittany actually collapsed in her bathroom Emergency services were called, and they did everything they could to bring her back, but they couldn't get her back. She was unfortunately pronounced dead at 10:04 a.m. Although that happened, I just feel like she was dead even before she got to the hospital. She shows me her experience. She shows me that the last 3 weeks of December, she was just feeling incredibly sick and she could not control herself. She was having some hallucinations. She felt like somebody was stabbing her in her stomach. The laryngitis, which I believe the poison was actually like burning her throat. So I don't even think it was laryngitis, although that might have been speculated because she couldn't speak very well. Yikes. She shows me she was bedridden. She shows me she could barely go to the washroom. She said it burned when she peed. There was just a lot of symptoms she had. And from what I asked her, why didn't you go to the doctor? She told me that there was a plan for a doctor to come and see her, and it never happened. From what I see, Simon really prevented her from seeing a doctor, A, because he thought that he would get caught, and B, because he was scared that they would take her to the hospital and keep him away from her altogether. And then he couldn't give her the poison, she'd get better, and she'd carry on with doing her career again. Now, when it comes to the coroner's official cause of death, they actually said it was due to a pneumonia, with secondary factors of her being anemic, multiple drug intoxication, which include the painkillers, antidepressants. No illegal drugs were found. And I can see why they would assume it was from the ammonia, but I believe these are all just the side effects of the poison. Now, she's a strong-ass woman. Physically, she was strong, which is why she lasted as long as she did. From what she shows me, he had been poisoning her for like almost 6 months off and on. And then at the last 3 months, consistently, like daily, at least once a day. And it got to about 2 times a day. And from what she shows me, he'd poisoned her 2 different ways: in her drink, which could have been like a tea or a coffee. And the other way was like little cake-like pieces of food. And I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's like a breakfast type of thing. So he would either put it in her drink or in her food, depending on if she was going to eat or not. There were mornings where she wasn't eating, period, where she would just have her coffee or tea, and he had to do it this way because she didn't want to eat. I believe that the extra dose that specific day, maybe the day before, was what caused her to pass. I see that her heart just stopped from everything going on in her body. It was just everything in her body was shutting down. It's pretty intense. The other thing that I found interesting is that her father also did his own report, and his report suggested some metals, some sort of heavy metal poisoning. No one ran with that. And I also want to point out that although her father made some mistakes in the parenting side very young, I think this is very Dee Dee Blanchard vibe, basically taking away access to Brittany, making things very hard for him to see her. There was a lot involved. I see that there was family drama beyond anybody's capability, and this woman just kept Brittany to herself. As Brittany got older, though, I see that she did have a little bit more of a relationship with her father, although she kept a lot of that private. Yes, her mother knew. Yes, her mother was pissed, but she didn't stand in the way as much as she did when she was younger. I even see that Brittany Murphy's mom didn't believe anything when it came to his findings. I know for me, I don't care how badly I hated my ex or whatever the case may be. If they found something that would point in the direction of how my kid died, you're damn right I'd be looking into that, regardless of who's involved. Now, luckily, after a while, and I don't want to take all the credit, there were many spirits and many people showing her that he was not it. He was a bad man, and all of the things he did to his exes. And if you have not looked into this, highly recommend to look up Simon and all the shit he did to his exes, because it will not surprise you on how he treated her. Eventually, she finally figured it out, crossed over, and left him. She was able to not only escape his grasp, but she sees everything the way she should have seen it in the first place. And she crossed over in the process. I think her dad, when her dad died, he was one of those spirits who were trying to convince her that she needed to leave. And she listened, finally. I also want to point out that Simon had only seen Brittany for the first time on Clueless. He didn't know her. He hadn't met her. She was only 17 when his obsession started with her. And then so much so that later on he ended up meeting her because he was super obsessed. He was a stalker of Brittany. She married her stalker. Now, before we get into the girl talk side of things, let's talk about this haunted house. Now, both Britney Spears and Brittany Murphy both lived in this house, obviously at different times. Now, when it comes to Britney Spears, let's talk about her experience. Now, she lived in that house in the very early 2000s. Now, according to her former makeup artist, Brittany had believed that the house was haunted, and she actually had a spiritual healer come out to check it out. Brittany had felt a very bad energy. Now, Britney Spears definitely has an ability, and it's interesting, not that anything ever came of it, but a friend of mine shared a video I made of Brittany to one of her reps, and he at least watched it. So there's always that, like, you know, Britney Spears kind of connected to this realm. But anyway, just had to point that out. This spirit, this energy, I should say, freaked her out so bad that she left the house and refused to return. Brittany felt like she was being pushed down the stairs. She felt like something was trying to kill her. I'll tell you, she was right. There was a very dark force energy in that house. The only thing that I could find was that whoever was there was a very evil murderer, a serial killer. Now, we'll talk about that here in a moment, but let's talk about Brittany Murphy's experience in that house. Now, the two of them moved in there in 2003. So they had actually been there for a solid 6 years. That's a long time to be in a haunted house, especially with an evil entity. Yikes. Now, Simon and Brittany both mentioned that they avoided certain rooms and felt uncomfortable in the home. Why did you stay? There was also like eerie issues of mold being everywhere in the house, but I also believe that that's not true. I think that it was like fake mold, visions of mold. This spirit was trying to freak them out, scare them, get them to leave, or even just give in to them so that this creature could take over or possess their bodies. It's pretty intense, actually. I did not anticipate how intense it was, but holy shit. Even Brittany Murphy's mother also agreed that she felt like that house was haunted as well. So as I was trying to figure all of this out, Jonathan Brandis, yeah, that's right, that teen heartthrob, had actually been the one to share all these details with me, which we'll talk about him a little later. He was the one who pointed me in the right direction. I want to tell you guys what I see. Now, did this evil entity have any sort of assistance when it came to helping kill Brittany Murphy? Did it help push Simon over the edge? Let's talk about how this works. When it comes to evil entities or evil spirits and taking over people's body, it can happen in a few different ways. Some that I'm not even aware of, but the ones that are most common, children and virgins, are very likely to be possessed. Innocence is something that evil loves to suck up, and they often come after it. But there's also another option. If you are already a greasy, slimy human being, evil entities can take over you as well, pretty easily. Now, I'm not saying that these are the only ways, because there are other ways. These are just the most common. So to answer that question, yes, it definitely pushed him over the edge to where he didn't realize, oh shit, I'm about to kill this woman. But I also believe that even if that entity wasn't in the house, I think he still would have poisoned her. I can hear voices telling him, give her more, give her more, give her more. So that's how the entity had their own attachment to this situation, which is also the angle that Simon was trying to come from when explaining all of this to Brittany. All right, let's talk about who this was. In 1997, there was a man by the name of Andrew Cunanan, and he actually ended up going on a murder spree in the 1990s, including killing a famous fashion designer, Gianni Versace. Now, if you want details of who he killed and how that all happened, it's pretty intense. And you're probably thinking, but wait, that didn't happen in LA. It happened in Florida. This murderer had killed Versace and felt incredibly powerful with doing that. Like every kill just made them become more and more evil. And Versace, being the last murder, was really attached to Versace. Obviously, when Versace ended up getting killed, they became more famous. Their stuff became more famous. And this entity latched on to items associated with Versace. And from what I see, Britney Spears was sent shit all the time, including to this house. And that's how this evil entity got where they got. They wanted to continue to kill people that were celebrity status. It was rather enjoyable. And I don't know if it was ever announced or pronounced or anything, but I am seeing that this particular entity had killed before it got to Brittany Murphy's home. Maybe even in Versace's home. I'm not exactly sure, but we'll read into those details a little later. We will talk about this serial killer and all of who they killed at some point later on because it's crazy. But yeah, so that is how Brittany Murphy had passed away. And now we're going to talk about the boy side of things because she wants to share a little detail with us here. Now, Brittany Murphy was linked to many different celebrities in her life and dating, including yours truly, Jonathan Brandis, which I had no idea until her and I started talking. And then Jonathan came into the picture and I was confused. But yeah, they were rumored to be dating back in the day. It was never officially confirmed, but she shows me he was like her first like puppy love kind of relationship. And he really, really liked her. He was going through a lot of his own mental health crisis, which I mean, clearly he passed away. But in that time that he spent with Brittany, he was probably at his happiest. He was sweet with her. Even when he talks about her now, he talks about her as if like, you know, she's the love of his life. So it's very sweet. He liked the way she smiled. She liked the way he laughs. So the two of them have spent some time catching up. She doesn't want to blame her mother, but her mom definitely stood in the way of their relationship for sure. She felt like Jonathan was going nowhere with his career, and she wanted Brittany to find like a director, somebody with big bucks to be with. And that was obviously before she had her own riches. But he finds peace in Brittany. And yes, we will make a Jonathan Brandis episode one day soon. Now, what happened to Simon? How did he lose his grasp? Well, because she crossed over, and he has yet to do so because he's going to have a pretty bad crossing over. When Simon crosses over or decides to, you know, see if he can pass the test, which is going to the good place or the bad place, no, he intentionally killed somebody. Did he purposely kill her? No, but he knew a possible consequence of poisoning her. So he's going to be poisoned for quite some time in the afterlife once he gets to that point. Her dad and many other spirits have basically banished that guy from coming anywhere near her. Anyway, enough about that fool. Ashton Kutcher. Now, she shows me that Ashton was the one that she really liked. She was more into him than he was to her. Like, they had a very good on-screen connection from the movie Just Married. But he, again, was also someone who had a lot of female friends and was constantly talking to them. And I mean, she comes from a very insecure family where her mother is like, if this man doesn't make you all his world and that's it, then you need to leave him. And she basically did. She listened to her mother, said, nope, Ashton could not have female friends, female ex-friends. He was a bit of a playboy in her mind, or at least that's what her mother pushed. So unfortunately, things did not work out with Ashton because of that, but she is pretty proud of him. I know there's a lot of nonsense going on in the world with him right now, and he did make some mistakes in his past, and even now with helping out with his ex-coworker, but that's a story for another day. She feels like things are going to change in a really good way for Ashton. There was also like this moment between Britney Spears, Ashton, and Brittany Murphy where like Brittany and Ashton were kind of flirting a little bit. There wasn't much going on there, but there was definitely a flirtatious energy. And it did bother Brittany quite a bit as well. So Britney Spears is a flirty girl. Ashton's a flirty boy. It just was a lot of drama. But she has no hate for Brittany by any means. But it was just an uncomfortable situation for her. Now, here's another favorite of hers, Eminem. There was speculation of a brief romance between the two of them. Her reaction to Eminem and talking about him is the cutest thing. And she said to me, well, when you get an opportunity to be with Eminem, you take it. She was incredibly infatuated with him. In fact, he made her stumble on her words often around him. She loved working with him. She felt like he was so kind to her. He was so kind to everyone, even people that were like on set, that were working long hours. Like he always would make sure that everyone took breaks. Like he was very much about making sure everyone on that set was taken care of, not just the celebrities. I think the downfall there was the substance abuse. I think that he was going through it himself, and there was a lot of moments where he would shut her out, and it's because of everything going on with the addictions in the background that he was in denial of. But she sees that he's better now and making so many changes in his life, and she's showing me that if they were now just meeting and she was still alive, she thinks that something magical could have happened. She loves herself some Eminem. She also wants to talk about Girl Interrupted. Now, at the time, Angelina Jolie and her were filming together. She was taken by Angelina's beauty and her charisma and her risks, and she took a lot of acting risks, and she was so amazing to work with. She felt like, wow, this is the person I want to learn to act from. Now, Angelina Jolie, a very, very private person. She does not share anything that happens behind closed doors ever, at least at this point in her life. And from what she shows me, although Angelina was with Billy Bob Thornton at the time, Angelina was like fighting the relationship. Like she was like, no, I don't care. I hate you. It was like a very toxic energy. And so she and Brittany might have kissed a little bit at some point when they were drinking. It wasn't anything crazy. It was like, Rachel from Friends, when she had her little kissing moment, something very similar. She remembers that moment very well. And she thinks that although Angelina has a bad rap now for many different reasons, she thinks that she's a good woman and thinks about her in the sense of like thanking her for letting her have a little bit of a wild side. Asked her who the best kisser of all of these people were. She has fully said Eminem. She also mentioned a few crushes she had, Paul Rudd being one of them, and Donald Faison, who's also in the movie Clueless. Her mother, though, would often prevent her from being any sort of biracial relationship, which I find rather odd. Another person that she talks about is Renee Zellweger. She says that she was one of those people, and Alicia Silverstone, but Renee was more of a hidden friend, but they also had a really good relationship too. She was just so controlled in her life and had to say no to so many places to go with these people, and it sucked. She missed out on a lot and she wishes she hadn't. She wishes she had stood up for herself that much more. Now, the final question we got here today is, how does she feel about her mom now? From what she shows me, I mean, her mom was checked out when she was still alive. She's even more checked out to this point. She worries a lot about her. Her mom just wants to be with her. She's really not angry with her mother. She feels like her mom did the best she could with what she had. She wasn't taught how to love. She didn't know love. No one taught her what genuine love was. So she doesn't blame her mom for not being the best mom she could have been. She also believes her mom needs to take a little accountability, and she thinks that when mom passes away and sees everything, all the pieces will come together, and not only will she be genuinely remorseful, but they'll be able to carry on with their relationship. She just wants her mom to know she loves her very much, regardless of what she did. She shows me that she felt like she was doing it for the best, and that's all that matters. But anyways, guys, that is everything today for the Brittany Murphy episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Definitely one of my favorites. Make sure to like this video, share it with all your friends, and we will be back in a couple of days with Matthew Perry, because holy shit, that is one hell of an episode. Until next time, guys, stay freaked out.